This is Chris McKaylee with another glossary of common California government terms, and this is for the letters M through P. Majority Floor Leader is elected by the Assembly's majority party, and this position is the right-hand person to the Speaker. Majority Leader, elected by the Senate's majority party, this position is the right-hand person to the President pro tempore. Majority of those present and voting is the vote requirement for most motions made in committee or on the floor. Majority vote is the minimum vote threshold required by the state constitution for passage of a bill and most measures. Mason's manual is the default set of procedural rules that are referenced by both the Assembly and Senate rules if their respective House rules do not cover a specific topic. Matter of statewide concern. If the legislature determines that a measure is of statewide concern, then the state law will be imposed upon both general law cities and charter cities. May revise or may budget revision. The governor is required to update his or her January budget proposal after the April tax receipts are available. Occurring by May 14th, it is an updated estimate of revenues and expenditures that replaces the estimates contained in the governor's budget submitted in January, and that deadline is imposed by the California Government Code. Measure. One of the three types of legislative measures in the California legislature: bill, resolution, or constitutional amendment. Member. This refers to an elected member of the California legislature, either a state senate, senator, or a state assembly member. Member-elect, when a legislator has been elected but not yet sworn into office. Message from the governor, message from the assembly, or message from the Senate is an official communication from the chief executive or the other house, which is placed in the assembly or Senate daily journals. Minority leader or Republican leader, elected by the Assembly's minority party members and the Senate's minority party members. This is the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate and Assembly. Mock-up. This is an unofficial copy of a bill with proposed amendments so that interested parties and other legislators and consultants can examine the bill as it will be amended. Model Act is a suggested example of a law intended for multiple jurisdictions to adopt. A motion is making a request for action in a legislative committee proceeding or on the floor. MOU or Memorandum of Understanding. An MOU negotiated by the executive branch with a union of state employees, for example, that is approved by the legislature. Move a call. This refers to a parliamentary procedure that delays the announcement of the vote on a measure. A call must be lifted in order for a final vote to be recorded. Move the previous question is a procedural motion to cut off debate and hold a vote. Move to re-refer is a procedural motion to send a bill back to committee from the floor or from one committee to another committee. Motion to strike is a procedural motion to remove an item from the agenda or the daily file. Municipal affair. A state law that is a municipal affair cannot be imposed upon a charter city. This is the opposite of a matter of statewide concern. A named act is a statute that has been named for someone, not a legislator, such as a constituent. Megan's Law, for example. The new laws report is compiled by the Office of Legislative Counsel, and this publication contains the new laws enacted in each session. No vote, a negative vote, or a vote against a measure or motion. A nomination, the governor nominates certain positions in the executive branch of state government that are confirmed by the state Senate. A non-concur or concur. To non-concur is when the House of Origin refuses to approve the amendments made to a legislative measure by the other house. To concur is when the House of Origin approves the amendments made to a measure in the other house and the measure returns for a final concurrence vote. Non-debatable is when a motion is not open to debate or discussion. Non-fiscal bill is a bill that will not be re-referred to the fiscal committee in either house. Non-general legislation is a bill that is not of a general nature. Non-general legislation could present a potential conflict of interest for a legislator because he or she may be deemed to have a personal financial interest in that non-general legislation. Nonpartisan, an office designated as not listing a partisan affiliation, such as the superintendent of public instruction, local offices, and those running for Superior Court judge in California. A non-substantive bill or non-substantive amendments is a bill or amendments to a measure that make only minor or technical changes. That is, they lack substance. Non-voting member, an individual who's appointed to a board or commission but does not have authority to cast a vote. A notwithstanding clause is a provision in a bill or statute that provides notwithstanding whatever is cited, the following may apply. It means to ignore the cited statute and only read the current provision of law. OAH is the Office of Administrative Hearings, which conducts hearings by administrative law judges or ALJs on administrative matters, such as a hearing on a license revocation for some sort of licensed professional. OAL is the Office of Administrative Law, which ensures that executive branch agencies and departments follow the procedural rules that are required by the Administrative Procedure Act. An oath of office is the officially prescribed oath that must be taken by an elected official in California. Officers of the Assembly or Senate, these are the individuals usually elected at the start of a two-year legislative session. They include the Speaker, the Chief Sergeant at Arms, the President Pro Tem, the Chief Clerk, the Senate Secretary, etc. Officers of a committee. These positions are the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary in the assembly or the assistant in the Senate. Official state designation. In the government code, there's a listing of officially designated state items such as the state rock, state flower, state bird, or state sport, among other provisions. An omnibus bill. This is a major piece of legislation that contains numerous provisions. On call, a measure that has been heard but did not garner enough votes for passage is then placed on call while the author attempts to garner additional votes in support of the measure. On file is a term used to describe a bill that's listed in the daily file as eligible for a floor action. 1 day wait is the usual requirement for a bill that was just amended to be on file for 1 day before being eligible for a vote. One-time cost is when a proposed or actual expenditure that's not recurring, usually only in one annual budget, and it's not permanently included in any baseline expenditures. Operative date is when a statute's operative, which is usually January 1 as a default, following the year of enactment, but can be a date in the future, which is referred to as a delayed operative date. Order of business, the order of considering matters on the Senate or Assembly floors or in committee. The order of enumeration. In the California legislature, it is the order of actions by a bill, which is amend, add, then repeal. Other house is the second house in which a legislative measure is considered after a measure passes its first house or the house of origin. Out of order, this describes when an action is not in order or not properly before the committee or the body. Override is a vote by one or both houses to reject the governor's veto of a bill. Oversight hearing is when a legislative committee conducts a hearing to review the actions or the inactions, usually of an executive branch agency or department. A pardon is the power of the governor to restore some rights lost after conviction of a crime. Parliamentary inquiry, this occurs when a legislator asks the committee chair or presiding officer at the floor a procedural question. Partisan is something of a nature that enjoys support from just one political party. Pass or passed or passage, a legislative measure successfully moving through a committee or the floor. Pass and retain, a bill author can request that a pending measure not be taken up at that moment, but that they can return to this measure the next day. Pass on file. A bill author can request a measure pending on the Assembly or Senate floor to not be taken up but retain its place in the daily file. Pass temporarily. A bill author can request a pending measure be temporarily not taken up, but that they return to this measure later in the same floor session. Penalty. When a law is violated, there's usually a criminal or civil penalty assessed for the violation. Per diem is a Latin term used to describe expense payments made to elected or appointed officials. Personal staff, the professional, non-elected individuals who work for individual members of the California legislature as opposed to committee staff. A petition is a formal request from legislators or when citizens sign their name to a document requesting official governmental action. A pilot program is when the legislature authorizes a new temporary statute for a specified period of time. A placeholder bill is one that is an intent or spot bill used to introduce a bill, but save a place for substantive language to be inserted at a later date. A plus section is one or more sections of a bill placed at the end that are not codified, and they provide certain types of statements, such as the bill's an urgency clause. A pocket signature is another term for the ability of our governor to allow a bill to become law without the governor's signature. A point of information is a formal request from a legislator seeking clarification from the committee chair or the presiding officer. A point of order. This occurs when a legislator raises an issue with the committee chair or presiding officer on the floor of a possible violation of procedural rules. Point of personal privilege. This occurs when a legislator raises an objection with a committee chair or presiding officer under the belief that their reputation has been attacked. Policy committee. These are the non-fiscal standing committees of the Assembly and Senate. Policy committee deadline refers to the deadline for measures to pass their policy committee. Postpone. A legislative measure or a vote can be postponed to a future hearing or time. PRA, the Political Reform Act of 1974 that was adopted by the voters as Proposition 9, obviously in 1974. It could also refer to the Public Records Act, as well as a private right of action. Precedent is a term used to describe the custom and practice or the order previously followed. Preemption is when federal law prevents a state law from conflicting with it, or when the state law precludes a local ordinance from conflicting with the state law. A preprint bill is one that's published while the legislature is in a joint recess as a means of reviewing a proposed bill. It's rarely used today. President of the Senate, the lieutenant governor, per the state constitution, has this role. President pro tempore, pro tem, or the PT. This person is elected by the Senate and leads the Senate in all aspects. Presiding officer is the individual who presides over the Assembly or Senate sessions. Presumption is a provision of law that must be overcome and shown not to be true. Previous question is a procedural motion to close off debate. A principal co-author is a higher level of a general, just a plain old co-author. A private right of action, or another PRA, is a provision of a statute that permits an individual to file a civil lawsuit to enforce a statute's provisions. Privileges of the floor. It's a procedural motion on the floor of the Assembly or Senate to allow persons on the floor itself. Prospective. A bill's provisions are presumed to apply to future conduct. Prospective is the opposite of retroactive. Proviso is a provision in a statute that imposes a condition. Public Records Act is the California law that allows the public certain specified access to governmental documents. And put over, a measure can be put over to a subsequent hearing, either at the request of the author or when it is done by the committee itself.